Hi, and welcome to another edition of All Politics is Local. On this episode of All Politics is Local, we're going to be talking about question 1, which is on the ballot, the state auditor's authority to audit the legislature. A yes vote would specify that the state auditor has the authority to audit the legislature. A no vote would make no change to the law relative to the state auditor's authority. In other words, to look at what the House and the Senate are doing up on Beacon Hill and to audit those. We brought on the program tonight a former state rep and has been working with the state auditor's office on this question for quite some time, Lenny Mirra. Lenny, welcome to All Politics is Local. Thanks for joining us.
John, thanks for having me on. Pleasure to be here.
It's an honor to have. So let's tell the audience a little bit of your background a little bit. I mean, you were a former state rep. Were a state rep for quite some time. Tell us a little bit about your background and then more importantly, how you got involved with question 1.
Yeah, so I was a state rep for 10 years representing the 2nd Essex District. And I came into the legislature, ran for the first time in 2012. And that just happened to be the same time that Diana DeZoglio ran for the state rep for the first time as well. She was a state rep from Methuen. And we both represented parts of Haverhill for a number of years. So we've worked on issues before, and we think very much alike. We're very good friends. I got her on speed dial. She's got my number too. And so when she was embarking on this, one of the things we always agreed on was the very desperate need of more openness and transparency on Beacon Hill, something that's severely lacking. It's actually quite an embarrassment that we have one of the least transparent states in the entire country. And we think that leads to a very bad place. It leads to a lot of waste and corruption. And so this is just one small step that we can take to address that. And so when she wanted to audit the legislature, she had asked her permission, and they weren't about to give it. So she took this route of putting it on the ballot. And that, of course, required 2 separate instances of collecting signatures to get it on the ballot. And it took quite a bit of work because a lot of the signatures that we gathered were discarded for whatever reason, a stray mark or a fold on a ballot sheet. So we had to collect over and above the number necessary to get on the ballot. So we did that twice, and we were successful. And it is now on the ballot. It will be question 1, and we're feeling very good about it.
Let's back up a litlittle bit because, as you know, you and I were talking before the camera started rolling here today. I was a selectman, been in local government for quite some time and state government for some time. Like you said, you were a state rep. When I was the chairman of the Board of Selectmen, I had FOIA requests done on me all the time. I had public records requests done on me all of the time, and I never shied away from it. Yeah, I mean, there were a couple times when I had to call the local newspaper and go, I didn't say what you have, in quotes around me, but that's a little bit different than even like the public records request. But when you were in the legislature, those same laws that applied to me as a local official didn't apply to you as a state rep or a state senator. And I think 95% of the public goes, really? We would just assume that the laws would be the same, but they're not, right?
That's exactly right. We've exempted ourselves. Well, the legislature exempted itself from open meeting laws. And so they don't have to discuss anything in the open. The public will never know how they debated any kind of bill. Worse yet, John, our legislature doesn't even let the public know how our members vote in committees. So we submitted a lot of bills every year. We submit over 6,000 bills. And if you submit them by a certain date, they supposedly get a hearing, quote unquote, a hearing. But the public will never know what was said about those bills. They'll never know how the members voted on those bills, nor will they see any of the testimony given on those bills, even with a FOIA request. And I can't think of another state in the entire country that does this. It is just outrageous. People should know not only how the rest of not their own state rep and state senator, but they should know how all the state reps and state senators voted on a bill in committee, and they can't even find that out.
Now, to clarify, will question 1 change any of this? Let's say you're successful with question 1 and it gives the state auditor the audit. Will any of that change, or will this just give the auditor to publicly disclose, audit findings?
Yeah, that's a great question. But if you look up the role of the auditor, you will see that it has an official explanation and description of the job. It's to conduct audits, investigations, and studies, to promote accountability and transparency, improve performance, and make government work better. And it's going to lead to something that a dirty little secret. It's not a secret anymore. The Boston Globe has done a good job reporting on all the additional titles and positions created by leadership in both the House and Senate. And to put it bluntly, John, like the House Speaker created a whole bunch of phony baloney titles and positions that come with gigantic raises in tens of thousands of dollars. And of course, to get one of these positions, all you have to do is do whatever the Speaker tells you to do. And that's what leads to our current situation with an embarrassing lack of transparency. So to become a committee chair, you just do whatever the Speaker says and you'll get a gigantic raise. And like the Globe reported, a lot of these committees aren't even meeting. Like they haven't met once the entire session. We consolidated power on Beacon Hill so that a tiny number of individuals, maybe 3, 4, 5 people in the whole building, decide every bill that gets passed or doesn't get passed. And the public never hears discussion on that. And their state reps and state senators have virtually no say. And they've been bought. They've been bought and paid for, and it's shameful. And it's our hope that an audit will expose this, like who is getting these positions, how much are they getting paid, and what is being traded in exchange for that? Because it's not supposed to work this way. That's not democracy. When we have 160 state reps and 40 senators, okay, so 200 legislators, and all the decisions are made by like 3 or 4 of them. It's not supposed to be that way.
Not to oversimplify it, and please correct me if I misspeak here. Essentially, a state rep's job, everybody's tax dollars flows to Beacon Hill. A state rep's job is to make sure that your proportionate money flows back to your district. Am I over?
That's one of the many jobs you have. Yeah, absolutely.
And if there's no transparency, how can you look your constituents in the eye and go, well, yeah, you're getting, Western Mass is getting, the same as, North Shore. Prove it to me. You can't prove it, So, I mean, will this allow for more transparency about where the money's going as well?
Yeah, I think it will. So keep in mind that the House and Senate get their own budgets. It's in the millions of dollars. And so Speaker Mariano gets to spend his budget the way he wants, and Senate President Karen Spill gets to spend her money the way she wants to, and it's in the millions of dollars. And we don't really know how and where it's getting spent. I mean, I think we do an outside audit that gives just broad parameters and dollar amounts, but it doesn't really tell the whole story. I think one of the things they're afraid of is it might show something embarrassing, like they spent $1 million fixing a bathroom in the Senate chambers or something ridiculous like that. But they should still make that public and just get it out there and just fess up to it. But the real secret is how much is being spent on these extra committee assignments, these extra titles, and are they needed? The public has a right to know that, and it's something that is shielded. It's hidden from view, and even people in the media aren't able to find that information. The Globe has started to report on it. They're doing a fairly good job, but I don't think it tells the whole story.
It's a nonpartisan rant, but I'm also a housing commissioner. I'm a governor appointee to my local housing authority, and we get audited every year, and I look forward.
That's right.
I look forward to it, and I appreciate it. But I've literally had auditors tell me, "Did you really need that box of pins? Did you really need to buy that doormat?" Yeah, we did. We bought a box of pins and a doormat, and like you're giving me a hard time about it, and we won't buy it next year because But so it's good that the transparency is there, but then we're hearing billions of dollars in the House and the Senate are not being audited. I think this is going to be great. So what are you hearing on the ground when you go? I know Diane is out. I thought it, my words, and I mean it complimentary. I thought it was wonderful how she's doing this walking tour right now. I think the videos were great. I think they were very effective, and she's literally walking across the state trying to get this thing passed. Let's talk a little bit about what you're hearing on the ground.
Yeah, she is walking from west to east across the entire Commonwealth, and you'll see pictures and videos. Yeah, literally walking, and you'll see pictures and videos posted on social media, on Facebook. Here's the thing, what you mentioned, she is posing with everybody. A lot of Democratic town committee people are meeting with her. The Republican Party, the Mass GOP, came out and helped her collect signatures for this. This is a nonpartisan issue. It should not be partisan. Here's the other thing, John. Not only should it not be partisan, it should not be controversial. This is something the legislature should just agree to, and they could. And in fact, they used to agree to audits on a regular basis. So she went to a committee hearing that the legislature put on for all the questions. And of course, they questioned her about this and said, why do you need to do this? We never did it before. And she was ready. She knew they were going to go down this path. And she had a cart full of books, full of previous audits. We used to audit all the time. 100 years ago, we were doing audits. So what happened within the last 100 years that makes this current crop of legislators think that they don't have to be audited? If anything, this crop, more than any before them, needs to be audited. I think they used to be subject to open meeting laws and FOIA requests, and now they're not. So now more than ever, they should just simply agree to the audit, and they are not. And it's absolutely shameful. We shouldn't have to go through this process, but we are, and we think it's going to pass. If we find that it's popular with everyone, the only people we're finding that are not in favor of this are the Democrats in the House and Senate. They're the only ones. The Republicans I talked to in office seem to have no problem with this audit.
Just for the viewing audience, so they understand it, will this apply to the governor's office as well?
I think the governor's office already gets audited. So does the attorney general's office. So does our judiciary. So this argument that it's crossing, the lines of the different branches of government, I think is a fallacious argument. She audits every entity, like you said, every housing authority, every transportation agency. And if she can audit the attorney general's office, and if she can audit the judiciary, then she ought to be able to audit the legislature.
I mean, basically the Senate holds the checkbook in the Commonwealth, right?
The House and Senate control the pocketbook, the purse strings, correct.
So, and if you don't want to audit, if you don't audit your own checkbook, how do you even know what you're spending money on?
That's exactly right.
And it's checks. I think everybody just wants to know, hey, how much money do we have this month? I don't think that you're going to find this, but let's just say you find out you have more money and you're going to, give it to, law enforcement, or you can give it to schools and stuff like that. Or more importantly, to find out where the boat is leaking, because I want to talk a little bit about this, because the boat is leaking in Massachusetts. You see, revenue is down, especially in Boston. State revenue has been down, 10 out of the last 11 months, I think the revenue has been down. It's fair to say costs have been up because of the migrant crisis. So I think the timing is great on this bill to come in and audit the legislature. But let's just talk a little bit about, the health of the Commonwealth. I mean, what are your concerns as a former legislature? Where's your head at on that?
I think it's great when we have a growing economy and revenue is coming in above expectations. And for most of the 8 years on Charlie Baker, that's what we had. Revenues came in higher than expectations. And so we did something very smart. We put a lot of it in our rainy day fund. Okay, I think we have a record amount, like $5 billion in that rainy day fund, which is great because it helps our bond rating, which lowers our borrowing costs. It's a good thing all around. But then, the economy doesn't grow every year, John. You and I have been around long enough to know that it's always expansion and contraction. We're going to have a recession at some point. And so revenues will come in below expectations. So what are we going to do when that happens? Like you said, we have a migrant crisis in the state that is costing us billions of dollars. And here's the scary part. I don't think there's a single person anywhere in the state that knows what we're spending on migrants or on immigration, both legal and illegal. I don't think anyone is keeping tabs on all of that, because this is a cost for every aspect of it. We just had to come up with another $1 billion for emergency housing for them. But that doesn't include the food, the clothing, the healthcare. Doesn't include what we spend on having their kids in our schools, because we have something called English language learners, ELL, that requires us to teach in their language. So now we have to hire additional teachers to teach in their language. So what is that costing us? And better yet, what's the long-term plan? We're coming up with emergency funding to fund those costs right now, but what about next year or the year after that? And what happens in a recession if revenues come in below expectation and we still have this migrant crisis? And then in the background of all of it is, of course, a housing crisis where we don't even have enough housing for our current residents. So it adds up to a very bad place.
What's going to drive up the price of housing, because it's supply and demand. Supply and demand always drives up the cost of housing. So kids coming out of college, getting into the workforce, want to get out of mom and dad's house. How? They can't.
Yeah.
One, there's no supply. Two, that supply just went up $600, $700, $800 a month, and you're fighting against other people for that apartment. So you're driving up the price of housing. And like I said, I have a lot of experience as a housing commissioner, and I get so frustrated. Every good politician will run an ad and say, we need more affordable housing. And I'm right there with them. We do need more affordable housing. But what is definition of what is affordable housing, number one? And number two, where are you going to build it? And, the most, and you know this from being in the legislature, the most powerful force in all of politics is NIMBYism, not in my backyard.
Right.
Where in Massachusetts that is predominantly built out for the most part, are you going to build these millions of homes that you need to solve this migrant crisis and even the regular housing crisis for normal people? And we haven't even touched on low-income senior citizens or homeless veterans yet. So, I mean, it's madness. The math doesn't work. So how's it going to work? And how much billions of dollars are going to have to be spent to make it work?
Billions of dollars are going to have to be spent no matter what. But you actually touched upon something else that got exposed through this process of a lack of transparency. I'm talking about 3A or MBTA housing, something that is immensely unpopular here in Eastern Mass, where just about every city and town now has this mandate to create more housing. So the state is forcing cities and towns to set aside a certain number of acres for multifamily housing. And the way that it came down is absolutely shameful. We never should have passed that bill. But here's what happened. A tiny number of people were working on this housing aspect of the bill, and they snuck this 3A rule into a broader economic development package, a bill that was over 1,000 pages long. And then they dumped it on the legislature and said, okay, we're voting on this tomorrow. Well, no one read 1,000 pages overnight. Nobody did. And it didn't matter anyways, because 90% of the legislature is Democrat. And like I said, just about every one of them is bought and paid for by leadership. They just do whatever the Speaker and the Senate President tell them. So this got pushed through without any real debate. And the public never got a chance to look at it or hear about it. Even the legislators, I don't remember anything about this MBTA zoning in that bill. But the way it read is that even the small towns where I live at, I live in Georgetown, I had Groveland, West Newbury, Boxford, little towns that are nowhere near an MBTA station. We don't even have a bus stop here, but somehow we're an MBTA town. And so this mandate got slapped on us, and the residents justifiably are spitting mad over it. And, part of it is NIMBY, like you mentioned, John, but a part of it is we had no say in this, and now we have no control over this. And this is what happens in a secretive legislature that does not do its job appropriately by not having public hearings and debates on important bills like MBTA housing. And now we're saddled with this thing. And here's the worst part. I don't think it's really going to work. I don't think it's really going to see a lot of housing built. They're saying, their number is 200,000. I'd be surprised if they got even half that amount through MBTA housing because of the way it's being implemented. And cities and towns don't want it. And in fact, today I heard Milford, Milton ended up in the courts for the SJC just this morning. I don't know what happened, but they're fighting it tooth and nail, as are a lot of cities and towns. But it just points to another reason why we need much more transparency and openness in our legislation, because things like this will keep happening, John, if we don't do something about it.
This is a snowball's effect. Like you said, nobody in the legislature read a 1,000-page bill either.
No way.
Find me a town councilor or a select board member that's read 1,000 pages of that and has explained to them. And no disrespect to any councilor or select board member or any town council. Find me a town. What town is going to pay your town council sit down and read that 1,000-page document and come back and dumb it down for the rest of our board and explain it to them? Oh, by the way, here's the bill. That's going to be. Even on a retainer, that's going to cost a city or town a lot of money. So nobody really understands what's in it. And like you said, it's probably not going to work. I applaud the effort to build more housing, but I don't think this avenue is going to work. That's why transparency in government is so important. And that's why, question one is so important.
That's exactly right.
Let's talk about it. I'm confident that question one is going to pass because I think both, like nonpartisan, people want transparency. I think people appreciate transparency. I think people appreciate accountability. Hopefully this will bring it. So what happens on November 5th? This gets voted in unanimously or, you win, 80-20, I think is what you're going to get. What's the process after that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So the question is what happens next session when the new legislature gets sworn in January? So will these new state reps and state senators vote to support the will of the voters, or are they going to side with their party's leadership? And that is the big question, because this has happened before. We had ballot questions on tax cuts, on capital punishment, on campaign finance reform, and voters voted emphatically on those ballot questions, thinking that, okay, this will be the new law, only to learn in a few months that the new legislature just decided, no, we're just going to do what we want, and we're not going to honor the will of the voters. And that is just criminal. It is catastrophic, and it shouldn't happen. But, that was years ago. We talked earlier about that tax cut. Back in the year 2000, we voted to lower the tax rate to 5%. We got there, but it took 20 years to get there. But that was a different time. Now with social media and the way news travels fast on the internet, I'm hoping that the public will be more aware of what the legislature is doing, and that they, hold them accountable and tell their state reps and state senators, no, we want this. We want the legislator to get audited, and we expect you to vote in support of our wishes. And if their state rep and state senator does not do that, I hope they're held accountable. Which, by the way, would be a help. Keep in mind, most of our seats go uncontested. We actually have one of the least competitive elections in America, which is another thing that, it's not to be proud of. And maybe this helps change that.
So the legislature could just ignore the will of the people. Let's hope that it doesn't happen, but they could ignore the will of the people. What then is the recourse for the people? Can this go to court? Does this get mitigated in court, or is it just you're going to have to vote out the people who don't want the transparency?
That's a great question. And if I had to bet, if I had to whip out my crystal ball, I'm predicting that it's probably going to go to court no matter what, because the legislature may try to challenge it in court first to give them an out to not follow it. I hope it doesn't go that way. I mean, like I said, what should happen, John, is the Senate President and the House Speaker should just say, okay, the people have spoken. We should do what the people have asked us to do. Just get audited. That's what should happen. But like I said, history shows that Beacon Hill doesn't work that way. So it's a very good question. And you know what? Your guess is as good as mine as to what will happen next session.
Interesting. The auditor was a former state rep and state senator, and now she still works up at the State House, at Beacon Hill in the office. Like anything, you hear chatter inside the hallways. Is she getting the cold shoulder from her former colleagues, or is she, quietly getting the, hey, good job, you're doing a really great job with this? What's the reaction to be? Because I've been on both sides of an argument before. Like they say, if you want a friend in politics, get a dog, because your best friend today might be your worst enemy tomorrow. So what's the feedback up on Beacon Hill? Other than the power brokers, of course.
Yeah. That's a great question. So I'm not in the building much anymore. I went to testify on a couple of bills that I had for them. That was about it. Talk to as many legislators as I can. I write a newsletter called the Mirra Memo, where I talk to them as well and write about it. I think right now the rank and file are kind of just taking a hands-off approach. Okay, we're only hearing from Speaker Mariano and President Spilka. We're not really hearing from the rank and file so much. So I've been writing a newsletter about races, and I only ask two questions. And it's about question one, do you support the auditor's attempts to audit the legislature? And number two, do you support the Safe Communities Act, which would make Massachusetts a sanctuary state? And those are the only two questions I asked. And so every single Republican I've talked to said, no, I don't support either one of those. But the Democrats are just not answering the question. So you bring up a good point, John. What are they going to do next session? If they're still in office, are they going to support the will of the voters, or are they going to support their party's leadership? I'm not hearing anything from the rank and file on the Democrat side.
So, Lenny, we never have enough time here on All Politics is Local, but I want to run down a couple things real quick before we let you go. You're here to talk about question one, and we really appreciate the insight that you brought tonight. Question one, the state auditor's authority to audit the legislature. Question two on the ballot, and like I said, all politics is local. These things are more important than what's going to happen between Trump and Harris. Trump and Harris probably aren't going to affect Lenny's life and John's life all that much. They can, right. But on a local level, you can be affected a lot more. And this is a big one. Elimination, question two, elimination of MCAS as a high school graduation requirement. That's probably going to be a contentious one at the polls.
Yeah,
Either
it is.
MCAS or keep the MCAS. So.
And it's a complicated one, too, because when I served, a lot of a lot of educators want to do something about testing. We spend a lot of time and effort on MCAS and on testing in general. We have SATs, LSATs, we have entrance exams to colleges. And so it's a lot of time and money on testing, and it's a lot of stress on students. And so when I first started to hear about this MCAS question, I was thinking, all right, maybe we can alleviate some of the expense and time. Question 2 wouldn't do that. We would still have MCAS, John. The only thing question 2 would do is take away the graduation requirement from it. And a lot of people are against it because they think that a high school diploma at that point will be meaningless. It'll be worthless because it doesn't really show anything. And so, it took a long time to get MCAS passed. It was passed a long time ago. It took a lot of effort to get there. But I think once we passed it, it improved the schools in Massachusetts. And in fact, I would go out on a limb here and say that Massachusetts, we criticize our state for a lot of things, but we get education right. And I dare say we have the best public educational system in America today. I went to public schools, graduated from Woburn High School. I sent my 2 sons to public high school. We moved to this area because I wanted them to go to Pentucket High School, where they got a great education. And because of MCAS, I think we have what is probably the best educational system in America today. So taking away the requirement, I don't think is a good thing. And I'm kind of siding on a no vote. I think we should keep the requirement.
Only because we're running out of time. The election's on Tuesday, November 25th, 2024. You can do early voting now. You can also, vote by mail if you've already probably received your ballots. Lenny, give a 30-second recap of question 1 and why people should pay attention to it.
Yeah, like I've written before, any government entity that claims it should not be audited can absolutely be audited. For too long, we've had this embarrassing reputation as the least transparent state government in America. That's not something to be proud of. It's something that leads to a very bad place. So I hope the voters get out there on November 5th and vote how you want up and down the ballot. You're going to vote for a president. You're going to vote for a U.S. senator. Please vote yes on question 1. It's for the betterment of the entire Commonwealth. It is a nonpartisan issue, and it should not even be a controversial issue. I hope it passes by a wide margin.
We say it here all the time on All Politics is Local. If you don't vote, you lose your right to complain. It's an important moment for many different reasons here. So get out and vote Tuesday, November 5th, 2024. You've been watching All Politics is Local, and we'll talk again real soon.